So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our final meeting for this semester. And of course, please receive my wishes for a happy and successful new year. Our course, our journey through modern European philosophy ends with the examination of Friedrich Nietzsche, a very important personality who has to teach us a lot. I think and I hope so. It's difficult to describe him exactly and adequately. One does not so exactly know how to begin with, and I'm trying, of course, to make a suggestion. This is the point. A very complex personality and many possible approaches to him. First of all, he is not what the people don't really know. He's not a philosopher in the proper sense of the word. This might right now surprise you, but this is actually the case. Nietzsche had not studied philosophy. Nietzsche did not teach philosophy, never became a professor of philosophy, never taught even philosophy at high school like other philosophers, like Hegel, for instance. And Nietzsche never wrote a systematic philosophical treatise. This is, again, something surprising about him. But on the other hand, where does his great philosophical reputation consist in? The point is that he wrote a lot, uh, many essays, many publications with literary context, many semi-political interventions in the context of his time, and this uh, has been appreciated as highly philosophical, mainly after his death. He lived a quite short life of nearly 45 years between 1844 and 1889. This is again a deviation from the rule, from what is publicly known, because not all people know that his periods where his really productive, creative periods ended in 1889, and then he felt prey to some mental disease, and so the next 11 years of his life were years of absolute mental darkness. This is the Oh, hello, Alice.
Hello.
Nice to welcome you to this final meeting.
Thank you.
And so to say goodbye somehow directly, not impersonally. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
So you spend your final days in Greece, or what's the case with you?
Yes, I'm back in Greece now.
And you will stay here till
I'm leaving in February at the start of
February. Hmm,
yes.
nice. I'm leaving also next week to go to Germany for for a month and something on a research stipendium. So I think we live parallel lives at the time. We're staying only temporarily here.
Yes.
So you can ask me anytime about your essay plans in order to pass the course. So I was talking about Nietzsche, and I'm resuming. Nietzsche is a great personality, but what is less known is that Nietzsche was not a proper philosopher. And this is maybe, on the other hand, the secret of his value and his originality. But we must have, we must shape our own opinion about this. I mean, Nietzsche did not study philosophy, did not teach philosophy, neither at the university nor at schools or at other public institutions. Nietzsche didn't write any systematic philosophical treatise, but nevertheless is considered as an important philosophical figure, a philosopher above other philosophers in the formal sense of the word. He wrote a lot, he published a lot while he was mentally active in only before he completed his 45th year in 1889. In the last years of his life were years of mental disease, unfortunately, and he was uh, protected and cared for by his sister, and even his mother died um, shortly before his own death. But these are other histories, other stories about his reception. And this is the great scandal about him. He's considered as a precursor of National Socialism, of Nazism. But we have to deal, face it, and to treat this bad reputation scientifically. Anyway, another way to approach him is his relation to classical antiquity. The science he had studied and taught at the University of Basel, Switzerland, was classical philology. He was a very, very, very good, very original philologist. He wrote studies, especially about ancient or the archaic lyric poetry, about a very important poet, Theognis aus Megara, from Megara, okay. And this depicts in a way his way of seeing philosophy in general, because in this ancient archaic poetry, he discovered something very important for him: the aristocratic ethics of ancient Greek, of the first archaic period, the first time of ancient Greek history, before the classical antiquity. And this is a main story that is very simple at first sight and has fascinated many, not only him, but especially him, in a sense. A story about the narration about the decline of ancient Greece, of the original values that prevailed at first and were the motive force of Greece's success or glory or grandeur. But these values suffered um, mm, decline and destruction in the period in which most people think the glory of ancient Greek lies. This is the classical antiquity, the age of Pericles in ancient Athens. This is what most people think is the culmination of ancient Greek history. But Nietzsche has certain reasons to say that this is not the positive side of ancient Greece. This is the negative side. This is at least the beginning of the decline of ancient Greek culture. And this decline, this road downwards, led later to Christianity, and Christianity is an even more destructive period. This Christianity, this is what Nietzsche is very famous or notorious about, his rejection of Christianity, his criticism, what he wrote about God's death, about the Antichrist, and this period of decline of moral, decline lasts until today, until Nietzsche's time, of course, and has to be reversed. A certain re-evaluation of all values, Wertung aller Werte, has to take place, and this is what he hopes, what he hopes for, what he is looking forward, and what he expresses in quite poetic form in the latest writings of him, writings about Zarathustra, about Dionysus, or about the eternal recurrence of the same, another famous formulation of him. But this is a very, I think, effective approach in order to make sense of him, taking as a starting point what he wrote about ancient Greece. By the way, this approach, this figure that at first we had the glory, and then we had the decline and fall of ancient Greek civilization. It's something that also other thinkers took over, and most important of them, Martin Heidegger. But Martin Heidegger was a proper philosopher, and he dealt with this idea in more specific ways, and he tried to incorporate it to other and really philosophical issues and challenges. In Nietzsche, we do not have such philosophical discussions, deep philosophical discussions. We have serious philosophical problems, but reduced, so to say, to practical aspects. This is what he is concerned with, what makes him anxious, what will become with our civilization, of our culture, today's culture. How is this decline to be stopped? And of course, in order to stop it, at first you have to understand it properly. And what came after Nietzsche was not, of course, this reversal he dreamt of, this emergence of a brilliant future with the restitution of the old lost values. This was too abstract or too good to be true, in a sense. We had people who tried to implement some Nietzschean ideas, took over some elements of him, and this is the case with many people of literature, novelists and poets who were influenced by late Romanticism or formed their own late Romanticism. There were poets also in the 20th century, especially in Germany, who took this sort of inspiration. And for instance, Rilke is very famous. Thomas Mann, of course, as a novelist, and other poets like Stefan Georgi. And some of these ideas were also implemented in a political sense. We have also nowadays people who dream of a restitution of a glorious past in a nationalist sense. And such orientations in thought and practice have certainly, or at least indirectly, the traces of a Nietzschean influence. But what is more important for us, I think, is the way Nietzsche was appropriated by critical thinkers of the 20th century. And you see, I don't know if this is visible to you right now, of this share screen works. You see some names here. We have many people who discussed Nietzsche's ideas, like Freud, Foucault, Ricoeur, Sartre, and others. And this idea we have here is very interesting. I think this idea of a new tradition that was inaugurated by him, the hermeneutics of suspicion. This is very influential and multidimensional. This hermeneutics of suspicion, we have many thinkers who developed critical ways of thought, not only these we just mentioned, Foucault or Ricoeur or Sartre or Baudrillard. More recently, in France, we have also the German current, we have the Frankfurt School, the critical theory, so-called critical theory, represented by Adorno, Horkheimer, Adorno, and still Habermas, who is still alive, with at the age of 95 years old. Okay, and who else? Also, the other representative of philosophical hermeneutics of the 20th century, Hans-Georg Gadamer, was influenced by Nietzsche and tried to interpret him properly, although he disagreed with him, and this it's about what he represents, another current of hermeneutics, so-called hermeneutics of tradition. It's something opposed, first sight, to this hermeneutics of suspicion. Hermeneutics of suspicion is something critical, something radical, sometimes something subversive, while hermeneutics of tradition is something affirmative or more conservative, some critics would say. But even the other current has had and still has something to learn from Nietzsche. And of course, Heidegger was a very important interpreter of Nietzsche with his 2 volumes based on his lectures. Not only this. So there are several thinkers who were influenced by Nietzsche, but in other ways and directions. These are unprecedented and unpredictable ways of appropriating, of assimilating a thought or thinker. And this is not always, but very often the case. That's namely the impact of one's thought is something other that one has at first envisaged or dreamt of or wanted to achieve. But this is also very important, and for some thinkers is even a proof that this indirect and unpredicted reception is something even more important than uh, direct continuation and repetition of one's thoughts, because in this case we do not have something new, something original. A very classical example of this productive and critical reception we have when encounter if we think of Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle was a critical pupil, at first was a pupil of Plato, but he he wouldn't have become the philosopher, the great philosopher he became if he had just tried to defend or uh, to repeat, to make popular what his teacher had said. And in this sense, uh, this current of Nietzsche's reception is very, very important, very interesting, very valuable. And this is what keeps him alive, in a sense. Because if we take what he wrote in the narrow context of their meaning, then we might easily say that these ideas were failure, but or were very simple, too simple, even for non-philosophers. But nevertheless, these simple ideas have an intrinsic, internal greatness. Another point in advance, before we try to decode his ideas, that Nietzsche was a phenomenon in the history of ideas, a unique phenomenon, unique appearance, but he had his own precursors. So this is a simple truth when we study history of philosophy or the history of everything. Nihil ex nihilo fit. There is no way possible to say, to claim that something emerges out of nothing. A birth has some parents and some elements that contribute to it. So, in the mental sense, the precursors of Nietzsche were two philosophers of the 19th century. We did not uh, dedicate a special chapter for them, the Danish Søren Kierkegaard and the German Arthur Schopenhauer. Nietzsche was aware of them and influenced by them, and sometimes we say that these philosophers are the first existentialists. And this is really a new orientation in philosophy, the existentialist thought. What does it mean exactly? This is this remains always a controversial issue. We'll try to outline it shortly by saying this is an act of emancipation, of liberation from the obscuring tradition, the metaphysical tradition which had produced until that time many misconceptions, misunderstandings, and had enslaved humans. This metaphysical tradition who had started with Plato and Aristotle and found its ends either with Kant or with Hegel, some say. And this metaphysical tradition found, on the other hand, negative reactions with Feuerbach and with Marx. But these reactions were, of course, politically oriented and motivated. With Nietzsche and with Schopenhauer and with Kierkegaard as well, we do not have this motivation, a vision of changing the world outright. The relation to politics is a more mediated or distant one, or a negative one. But these existentialist philosophers, or this existentialist line of thought that started in the middle of 19th century with Kierkegaard at first, who was a pupil of Hegel, by the way, too. He had visited Berlin and attended lectures there. Had, one can say, Nietzsche as a representative, and then the other important existentialists of the 20th century. We mentioned some names. Sartre is the most famous of them. Heidegger was considered by some thinkers as an existentialist, although he tried to deny it vehemently. And Karl Jaspers, another important philosopher and psychiatrist as well. And the great novelist and essayist Albert Camus. And what characterizes all these thinkers? The emphasis on human existence. That's where the term comes from, existence, as opposed to essence. The primacy of existence. We are existent entities, beings, of course, living beings. We have a certain and determined life to live, of course. And what philosophy teaches us about our essence, about our secret meaning of life or afterlife, metaphysical or transcendent life, this is misleading us. We have to discover our existence, to rediscover it, and to deeply appreciate it. But the contrary side of this approach is that when we insist upon our existence, about this very evident dimension of our being, then it becomes also obvious that this existence, a limited one, limited existence, it is. So this is the bitter truth. This is what we must cope with, we must reconcile ourselves with, and this is what becomes our torture, our mental, our physical, mental and emotional torture. It's not easy to accept this existential reality. And what comes next? Many opportunities, many possibilities exist in order to cope with this transcendent and difficult truth. Nietzsche's exit from this suffering, from this mental suffering, is only one possibility. There are also other possibilities represented by other thinkers. And so, what does Nietzsche dream of, and how does he concretely conceive this existential reality of our humanness? What philosophy, what traditional metaphysics teaches us is nothing, is, one can say something even worse about it, something worthless and something misleading in any case. What actually governs our existence is the instinct of towards our self-preservation. What distinguishes all living species without exception. Self-preservation is only expressed in other ways by humans compared to other animals. Today also we talk about human and non-human animals. So our sophisticated way of expressing and trying to um, to, to realize and to impose towards others this basic instinct, basic drive for self-preservation. Our sophisticated way uh, includes the great whole of our mental and artistic production, and so on and so forth. But in philosophy as well, behind all these creations, you have to be able to critically discern, to distinguish what really matters for humans. This is the simple and great secret which must serve as a key in order to critically reevaluate the philosophical tradition. The will to power is another aspect of this basic instinct, although we must clarify here that this term was not employed by Nietzsche as such. Wille zur Macht. This was a title actually given to a series of scattered essays by Nietzsche and notices by his sister, Elizabeth Förster Nietzsche, who edited them post-mortem. And this was misused, abused by Nazis later. Talked about the absolute will to power to impose a new order, a new Reich, and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, there is an element of truth in this idea. The way to power is a way to the road to power, a way to secure this uh, self-preservation. And what has philosophy to learn from the recognition of this truth? then we have this important and multifaceted perspectivism. There's no absolute truth, metaphysical truth. This must be rejected, discarded. We have the ability to mentally conceive, to grasp things, but at any time from a certain perspective, a point of view, and this is what constitutes the also famous Nietzschean perspectivism, the relativism. Another word in order to understand it properly, this is relativism or nihilism. Nihilism is the negative outcome, the loss of absolute truths and absolute values, which was, on the other hand, interpreted by Nietzsche as a problem for his time and for his contemporaries as well. And this nihilism, the negative effect, outcome of relativism, what other thinkers would warn of, would see as a negative consequence, this can be reversed, can be turned into something positive. And this is what distinguishes Nietzsche, especially with the emergence of a new world with the reevaluation of old values, with the new discovery of the lost aristocratic ethics and morals of ancient Greece, with total rejection of the ethics of compassion, which distinguishes Christianity. This is very, very negative appearance, and this hope of the emergence of some new Messias, called by Nietzsche Zarathustra. This is the other aspect, the other reincarnation of the Jewish and Christian Messiah. And this is, of course, very vague and not so realistic if you try to see it critically, but nevertheless, this is this sign, a certain sign that Nietzsche has this hope and does not want to abandon this hope for a new, better world. But the condition, the special and certain and concrete condition for this new world is that we accept the eternal recurrence of the same. This is what distinguishes the ancient Greek thought and the other ancient traditions as well. Unlike the Jewish Christian tradition, we had a linear conception of development of history and of time. Only one line which leads to the emergence of a bright future. This is rejected by Nietzsche, and he sees that, on the other hand, there are possibilities if we reject this negative Christian tradition to attain a future, a better future,